Okay, let's deal with Linux and partitioning there. Now, I've got Linux Mint installed, and I'm going to put in GP because GParted is what I'm looking for, and there it is, GParted, which is a nice little tool. And within Unix, the Mac and Linux, this version, it needs to have the password of root, because I'm going to be messing with the file system. So here it is. Now, the way this is displayed is quite a bit different than what we were looking at with Windows, if you haven't watched that yet. We could do this at the command line, and if you've taken the Google class or are taking it, you'll get a chance to do that. But it's definitely easier to do in a graphical environment. All right, so we're dealing with SDA1, SDA2, and SDA5. So SDA is referring to your first device. So this is a 16 gigabyte SDA drive here, or volume. And this is what they've broken it down into. And you can see it. Select the different items there. Right up here, I can change what drive I'm dealing with. Now, I created this little partition. It's only 100 megabytes, but that's okay. I don't need a ton of space. This is the main difference, right? This is harder in most people's evaluations of how to do something. Let me go ahead and make this full screen so that we're not, it's not going to let me do that. So I'll drag it over here, and then I'll make it full screen. That way we're not confused at what we're seeing. Back in the Windows system, we would have seen, like, this would have said, hey, this is your disk 1, or disk 0 actually, and then disk 1, and then disk 2. It would have showed us right on the screen. The way they're displaying it in GParted is, this is where you're going to select the different devices that you have available to you, and now here's what's on them. You got to know that. You have to know that up front. In the lab that we do, I mention that to people, and sometimes they'll make the mistake and try to format their actual real volume that they have, right? This has got a FAT32 little tiny boot, then it's got extended, and then within that ext4 is what it's dealing with. So we got a little FAT32, and then we've got our extended ext4 is set up. I want to deal with a different drive. So when you are wanting to deal with the second drive that you've installed in your computer, or a USB flash drive that you plugged in, you need to come up to this option here and select the next one. That's why I explained that SDA, that's your first drive, SDA. Probably serial disk A, probably. Or SATA disk A, or SCSI disk A, whatever they originally termed that for. So this is B. That's my second one. That's very, very important. You don't want to be messing with what you're booting with. Okay, now we've got a few options here. Notice that under device, there's actually this option to create a partition table. That is different than actually creating a partition. I know that's kind of weird, but that's the way they have it. These two steps, creating a partition table and then partitioning, they're divided out in Linux, where if you were dealing with Mac OS or you're dealing with Windows, when you create a partition, it's creating the table that it needs at the same time. So I'm going to go to Device, Create Partition Table, and then it has a bunch of options that I can do. GPT, or GUID partition table, is the standard. MS-DOS would be let's go back in time. All the others, right, like Atari, well, that's because people do a lot of emulation of that. They do a lot of emulation of Amiga. An AIX system is a Unix-based system. There's BSD, a Unix-based system. Most of those are probably Unix-based systems. So we want to set it to GPT. GPT is what this should be set to. GPT, GUID partition table. That's the new way of doing things. And again, saying new in this particular instance means this is the way we've been doing things for the past 10 years. All right, now we're going to create a partition. And we go to new. And this has a nice slider on it. So we've got some improvements, right? Wow, we've got some nice improvements. As a matter of fact, I can take that and say, I don't even want that new partition to be on the front of it or that new volume to be on the front of it. I'm going to put it all the way on the end. You can do some pretty fancy stuff. I've seen it error out quite a bit if you move this over. So we're just going to leave that. I'm just going to create a partition there, and a primary partition. That's what we were dealing with. We don't really need to change that. This will be, whoops, we'll call it part 1. We'll stop using the term partition. We'll call it volume 1. And ext4 would be what you would use if you're dealing with Linux. You can also create a FAT16, old school, FAT32, still old school, HFS, which is old school Mac, Linux swap file. You can create Minix. There's NTFS right there. There's Riser FS. Wow, you can just, or you can just say, I'm not going to format it, but I'm going to pretend like I am. So let's use something that is really cross-platform. So we're going to do FAT32 on there and hit add. Now I've got some unallocated space. I'm going to click in here and I'm going to create a new partition again and see how it's selecting the whole area. And I will say, no, give me that much of it. That's what we're going to do. And I'll let this do an ext4. So we'll do a volume 2. ext4, that's the name of it. Oh, I didn't give the other one a label. So we'll call this Linux. We'll add that. And there we are. And now we've still got this unallocated space. So again, I'm just kind of showing you, I'm not following along in the lab. Now we have to realize that this is the full unallocated space. This is no longer representing all of it. And we can tell that by the size. So if we had been looking at the size of these things, we would know that. Let's go ahead and make this one NTFS if I can. There we go. This will be volume 3, Windows, and hit add. All right, now here's the interesting thing. None of anything I just did has actually happened. I've gone through the entire process of setting up this new way of doing things on this particular volume, this particular drive, I mean, or device, and it's not actually done. None of this gets done in GParted until you hit apply. And I could have created this, hit apply, done the next one, hit apply, done the next one, hit apply. So I can also undo everything. None of it's happened yet. That's really awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and apply it. It's like, are you sure? You might lose data. And we'll go ahead and let it go. We can take a look at the details on which operation it's on, and it finished. And there it is. It's a done deal. This is showing it's completed. As a matter of fact, this is showing how big the actual index is on there, because there's nothing else there, and it's taking up that much space. Of course, these are just megabytes. These are not gigabytes, so it's pretty small. But having something small, if you're doing this, is quicker, right? You're not actually formatting as much. So now I'm going to go through and let's just destroy these. I can right click on each one of these. Again, none of this has happened. I can just go undo, undo, undo. None of it's happened. So I can right click up here and delete. I can go up to here and delete. I can right click down here and delete. So we'll delete them all, and I will hit apply. I could actually create a whole new partition table, in pretend world, and then hit the check mark. I don't need to actually do this step. I just want to show you that there it is. It's all unallocated. Now I can right click it again, and I can go to new, and I can slide this around, and I can make this HFS. And you may ask, why primary, why logical extended? This is really old school stuff. You can look that up and see what it is. I'm not going to waste your time explaining it. We'll take the rest of this and we'll create an NTFS partition. We'll just do FAT32 because it's right there. And now I can hit check and it will do that for me. So really important to learn the interface, even more important to remember this drop down box and make sure you're on the right drive that you're dealing with. Now I want to make sure this is cleaned off. I have seen it where Windows in particular doesn't know what to do because it was dealt with in Linux, and Linux did something it didn't like. I don't know what its problem is. I'd have to read up on that, but I've seen that happen where I mess with a drive like this and then I put it in another system and it's like a Windows system, and Windows is like, I can't, I don't know what to do. I'll go back to device one last time and create a partition table and make it a GUID just to show that. And that's it. That's getting around in GParted. Again, this is a Linux Mint that has GParted, but most distributions have GParted installed.